Chapter 901. When it was close to noon, Prince Emo came to the Marquis of Jiyuan's estate on his own and picked up Arbor to head to the Supreme Court. On the way, he quietly told her, Royal Father's decree has already been passed down. Tomorrow, Chao Domba's group will be chased out of the capital. Arbor was currently leaning on him, her teeth gnawing on a piece of dried fruit. When she heard this, she looked up and pursed her lips. You hid from your dad yesterday and didn't see him. If you went today, how could your dad not speak ill of me to you? He probably poured out his grievances for the entire morning. Emolien laughed and wrapped his arms around her. He lowered his head and rested his chin on her head. Guess what Royal Father said to me? Wasn't it just complaining to you about how fierce I was? Arbor snorted and replied without thinking. That's not it. You definitely won't guess. When his dad saw him entering the palace to meet the emperor, he immediately jumped up from his throne in excitement and dryly said to him, Son, do you think you can buy anything for fun? In the future, buy less of those nonsensical talismans for your wife. You even bought so many of them. Can these talismans be eaten or what? After Emolien repeated it, he couldn't resist laughing first. The great king simply didn't expect that you drew all these talismans yourself. He even thought that I bought them for you. How about you draw a few talismans on the spot next time and scare him again? Is there such a sarcastic son like you? Arbor cast him a glance and inwardly cursed him for being a fraud. She reached out to tug on a lock of his inky hair and forcefully tugged. How is the new batch of ebony I asked Bailey Shi to polish coming along? It's already in the process of being shipped, right? It should arrive on the day of the Lantern Festival. Emolien looked down at her with a grin. Jojo, I heard that Duan Yu came to find you this morning? That's right. Arbor rolled his eyes at him. Why are you always sending your tail to follow me? I'll inform you as soon as there's something going on. I'm just worried about you, Emolien continued calmly. I heard that you smiled at old Fifth of the Marquis of Suan's estate. Was she smiling? Arbor raised his hand to touch his cold little face and muttered to himself, I don't think so. I don't feel anything. He's smiling. Emolien nodded her head with certainty. Lightning, that fellow, even secretly described it. The crown princess suddenly smiled at the Marquis of Suan's residence's old Fifth, like a spring breeze brushing against one's face, like 1,000 trees blooming. The Marquis of Suan's estate's old Fifth was momentarily stunned. Look, look, look. Lightning's description was so accurate. What other information did he not have? Oh, that might have been a smile. She didn't have any impression of it. Suddenly, he felt his body lighten. The little fellow who was chewing on a piece of dried fruit was suddenly lifted up and turned around. They looked at each other face to face. What are you doing? Our dear Chow Mu's small face rapidly flushed red at such a close distance, practically sticking to his face. Smile. Huh? Arbor was baffled. He suddenly leaned closer, so close that she could clearly see his long, curly eyelashes fluttering in the wind as they blinked. Smile. His breath completely enveloped hers, causing her to be completely flustered. She didn't even know where to place her small hands and feet. He was so close that her heart started to sway a bit. Who was this sudden? Who could smile? Smile. He even gripped her small chin with a rather stern expression. Chapter 902. Arbor's large round eyes looked at him, showing a bit of her little white teeth. You didn't smile. Emolien moved closer to her face, using his warm face to rub against her little face. You have to smile at me like a spring breeze. He was still brooding over that guy Lightning's description. Arbor thought he was a bit funny, reaching out to grab a strand of his hair. What did Lightning say to you? He said you smiled very warmly at Marquis of Suan's family's old Fifth. And the key point was that he was stunned. Damn, just thinking about it made him angry. He wasn't there at the time, but he was there to dig out Marquis of Suan's family's old Fifth's eyeballs. I really didn't smile. Arbor herself didn't remember smiling at that guy. If she did, it was most likely a cold smile. You did smile. he emphasized, hugging her so close that his face was close to hers. As soon as he lowered his head, he could open his mouth and bite her little mouth. "Hurry up and smile, or else I'll punish you." Arbor only felt that when this man was childish, he was like a little child asking for candy. That pair of curved phoenix eyes contained a trace of soft grievance, practically melting her heart. "You scoundrel." Arbor couldn't help but giggle, subconsciously biting her little mouth, using all her strength to push away his boiling hot body. "Hurry and go away. You're about to burn up." "I won't go." He hugged her, using all his strength to rub against her body. "Smile again. Smile all day long, I'm not an idiot." Arbor was anxious and angry, using a bit more strength to pull on his hair. "Hurry and let go. Otherwise I'll pour water on you." "I won't let go even if you pour water on me." When a certain person pestered her to the point of being a scoundrel, he was absolutely invincible. Arbor couldn't help but giggle, a sweet smile appearing on her little face. She reached out to poke his shoulder. "I'm done laughing, hurry and let go." Seeing that he didn't have any reaction for a long time, he hugged her and stared at her little face without blinking. Arbor was embarrassed to be stared at like that. He hurriedly covered his phoenix eyes that were as deep as the starry night sky. "Why do you keep looking at me? Jojo, you're so beautiful. When I look at you, I feel like my heart is no longer with me." Yes, it looked like it was about to fly. "Just let me take a few more glances at you. You can't lose a piece of meat." "Bah." Arbor turned his face away, puffing out his cheeks and pretending not to look at him. In fact, her heart was beating very fast. She felt that if she was too close to him, he would most likely eavesdrop on her heartbeat and laugh at her. Out of the corner of her eye, she couldn't help but sneak a peek at him. Her sneaky little appearance made Emolienne's heart soften and she couldn't help but laugh. Emolienne hugged her and rubbed her up and down. Her voice was low and misty as she mumbled, "What should we do, Jojo? You still have 2 months before your hairpin ceremony." Sigh. He was so anxious waiting. Xiao Mu's small face turned even redder, and she thumped his back with a moderate amount of force. Suddenly, he felt the carriage shake slightly, as if it was slowly coming to a stop. Arbor tugged on his long hair and whispered anxiously, "We're here. Hurry and let go." Emolienne reluctantly let go of his embrace. Arbor broke away from his embrace with a whoosh, lifted the curtain, and jumped out. The cold wind outside blew, and the heat on her face faded a little. But her heart was beating like a drum, and only she could hear it. "It's still 4 o'clock. It's probably going to be 12 o'clock. Don't wait for me." Chapter 903. Arbor reached out to cover her face. When she turned back to see him following her with a smile, she couldn't help but glare at him. This person had a strange charm all over him, like a magnet that always attracted other people's eyes. He was especially annoying. Emolienne didn't care that the little fellow was scowling at him. He was secretly amused as he reached out to take her little hand and pulled her towards the Supreme Court's entrance. "We've been to the Supreme Court's prison twice already. I'm familiar with the place, so I won't go down with you, okay?" Arbor nodded, using her eyes to indicate for him to let go. "You're not going down with me, so why do you keep holding my hand? You're obstructing other people's movements." Emolienne looked at her innocently. "I'll send you to the entrance." The Supreme Court's Vice-Chancellor had already heard the news and ran out to receive them. It was the nearly 40-year-old official that they saw last time. Beside him was a naturally supercilious official. When he saw the Crown Prince and Crown Princess, he also came over to greet them with a smile. Emolienne said in a low voice, "This is Official Gu." Emolienne secretly gave Arbor a look, and transmitted a voice into her ear. "He's the one who barged into Second Imperial Brother's Fu to capture Ding Ting Ding." Arbor was enlightened. She glanced at Official Gu, but didn't say much to him. She followed the Supreme Court's Vice-Chancellor to the prison. Along the way, the Supreme Court's Vice-Chancellor politely exchanged greetings with Arbor. The capital's Chao family are all locked up in the prison in the north. Chao Dongbua and the others are all locked up separately. I don't know which one the crown princess wants to see. I don't want to see Chao Dongbua. Arba pursed her lips. Take me to the prison cells where the Chao family's commoners are locked up. Yes. The Supreme Court's vice-chancellor called over a jailer to lead the way, and he brought Arba to the largest prison cells in the north. There were 40 to 50 people locked up in each cell. It was a dark mass as far as the eye could see. Seeing that someone was coming over, those people were like dying quails. They couldn't help but cry out, "Let me out!" one after another. Scram, scram, scram. The jailer swung his whip and flung back the hands that had broken out of the wooden cell. Arba passed by and searched for 6th Uncle Chao's family of 3 in the cell. All of a sudden, a person pushed his way to the front of the wooden cage and slammed his head into the cage. He clung onto the wooden pillar and shouted at her, "Arba! How dare you come to Arba? You be *Tisich, you caused us to be in this state, and you still dare to come and see us? You black-hearted, venomous woman, why don't you just die?" A whip struck her hand, and in return, she let out a wail of pain. Arba turned his head and looked at Joni coldly, a mocking smile on his face. Miss Chao definitely didn't know that she would live such a miserable life. Arba tossed her howls and clamors to the back of his mind and strolled past her. He found 6th Uncle Chao's family of 3 in the 3rd large prison cell. Chao Mu beckoned at the jailer, having him open the cell door. Instantly, many people attempted to charge out. When the jailer saw this, he effortlessly lashed them back with a few whips. "All of you, behave yourselves. You will be exiled to the northwestern desert tomorrow. There's no need to be so anxious. There will always be a chance to let you out." The jailer's gloating words elicited howls and screams from the Chao family. They had been living and working in peace and contentment in the Mo Kingdom capital these past few years, and they were used to living like princes. How could they possibly adapt to the bitter cold of the northwestern desert? Chapter 904. Arba, Arba. A thin, dark-skinned woman screamed as she rushed to the door, but she was whipped back twice by the jailer. Her eyes were red as she glared at Arba from across the wooden pillars. "Arba, do you still have a conscience? Do you still have the slightest bit of kinship? Don't you think it's enough that you've caused us to be like this? You actually want to send us to the northwest desert? You. Arba stared icily at the dark-skinned woman from across the cage. This person was her youngest aunt, Su Jiao, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. The current her was even more tanned and skinny than the last time they met, and her chin had already sunken in. Su Jiao looked at Arba in this state and suddenly prostrated herself on the ground, kowtowing in exhaustion. She sobbed uncontrollably, looking remorseful and heartbroken. "Arba, eldest niece, just forgive uncle, auntie, and your cousin. Let us out. Don't send us to the Northwest Army. Woo-woo, that really isn't a place where people can stay. Jojo, take it as second aunt's fault in the past. Second aunt has let you down. If you want to blame or resent me, it's up to you. Please, for the sake of our family, for the sake of your father and mother, let us live." "That's right. Jojo, give us a way out." Chao Zhongheng was truly scared at this time. He originally thought that he could live a good life after being brought back to the Chao family by Chao Dongbua, but he didn't expect Chao Dongbua to be a hypocrite. He found a residence to settle them down, and their family was still starving like before. It was just that the place they lived in was better than the run-down temple, and the decorations in the house were also exquisite. But what was the use of these? They couldn't eat or drink. They only looked good on the surface, but in reality, they were still in a state where they were about to go crazy from hunger every day. Moreover, this time, they didn't do anything. They were completely tricked by Chao Dongbua and were dragged into prison because of him. They weren't willing to be sent to the Northwest Army like this, so no matter how uncomfortable Su Jiao was, she had no choice but to yield and lower her head at this moment. However, it was as if a fire had ignited in her heart, burning fiercely. She felt that the anger in her heart was about to engulf her. Since when did the people of the First Branch become so high and mighty, so high that they couldn't climb up to them. Wei Ziqin, whom she had always looked down on, actually didn't hesitate to use her as an excuse to beg for mercy from the person she had looked down on the most in order to survive. Su Jiao thought with a sour taste in her heart. She raised her head and looked impatiently at this niece, looking like she was begging for her forgiveness. Arber gazed into Su Jiao's eyes as if he had walked through the long river of history. His long and distant gaze rippled as if it had passed through a century. That pitch-black gaze without the slightest ripple caused Su Jiao's heart to become unsettled. Su Jiao felt that her niece's eyes, which were as cold as a dry well, were a bit frightening. It seemed that ever since this niece was 7 years old, she had accidentally rolled down the hill from the academy. After she woke up from her coma, Su Jiao's life started to deteriorate day by day. Su Jiao was quite unwilling, but now, she had no choice but to admit that this niece's current status was something that she probably wouldn't be able to catch up to in this lifetime. Perhaps only by begging for mercy could she obtain a chance of survival. Arber glanced coldly at Su Jiao. He took out a pouch of money from his sleeve and threw it at Su Jiao's feet. Su Jiao only felt her heart sink with a thump. Chapter 905. At this time, Qiao Zhongheng cowardly shrunk behind his wife, and Qiao Long didn't even dare to let out a fart. Su Jiao gritted her teeth and trembled as she bent down to pick up that money pouch. When she reached out to open the pouch, her eyes immediately bulged when she saw the piece of silver in the pouch. 20 taels. A string seemed to have been plucked in Su Jiao's head, and her entire brain suddenly exploded. Arber curled his lips, but there wasn't the slightest hint of a smile in his pitch-black eyes as he stared at Su Jiao and said, "Young aunt, back then, if you had even the slightest bit of—" Arber made a gesture with his pinky. "Conscience. Then you wouldn't have been so heartless as to conspire with Wu Yanjun to sell my younger sister to the Dou family." Su Jiao's entire body trembled uncontrollably, and her eyes were filled with disbelief as she looked up at Arber. "How did you know it was 20 taels? No more, no less." The commission she received was exactly 20 taels, so how did this child Arber know? That was 8 years ago. Even this old woman didn't know. Arber was just a 7-year-old child, so how did she know? Arber coldly swept a glance at Su Jiao as he approached that prison cell step by step. He softly said to her, "Did you know? That young master of the Dou family is a pervert. If you guys really conspired to send my younger sister to that hell on earth, do you think she'll live past 12 years old?" Su Jiao's entire body trembled. Looking at Arber's nearly morbid expression, she shrieked in fright, "Don't come over." Arber halted his steps and coldly gazed at this woman. 20 taels to buy the lives of your family of 3. Keep the change." Old 6th Qiao and 6th Aunt Qiao both looked up at this time and narrowed their eyes as they glanced at Arber. They didn't seem to have expected that she would be so ruthless as to abandon her own uncle and aunt. Qiao Ye, on the other hand, followed behind her parents. Her pair of cold eyes contained a faint light of confusion as she looked at her just like that. "Arber, Arber." Su Jiao was thoroughly flustered. She tightly gripped the money pouch in her hands as she cried, threw a tantrum, and regretted her past actions. "Jojo, Jojo. Auntie knows her mistake. Auntie really knows her mistake. Can you give me another chance? Or maybe you should give your cousin a chance. Your cousin was just a child 8 years ago. He didn't know anything. He's innocent. Jojo, Jojo, I beg you, don't be so cruel. Innocent." Qiao Mu sneered as she turned around to look at her deeply. If he hadn't been reborn, his sister Jolin would have died next year. At that time, who would give Jolin another chance? Who could pity Jolin? Who could sympathize with her, a person who had lost her mother, her younger sister, and her younger brother? Who could sympathize with her? Her future would be so bleak. Don't blame her for being ruthless. It was an era where either you die or I die. It was better for you to die. Qiao Ye and her parents followed behind Arber and walked out of the prison cell under other people's envious gazes. All sorts of feelings welled up in her heart. When she walked into the sunlight, she saw that person turn around and smile foolishly at her. Her ice-cold heart seemed to have been melted by something as it slightly smoothed out. Chiao Mu sprinted towards Emolien and ran headfirst into his embrace. Prince Emo was bursting with joy when he saw that face begging for a hug. Chapter 906. His little fellow had taken the initiative to ask for a hug. It was such a good thing, so of course, he had to firmly grasp it and hug her tightly without letting go. Xiao Ya was startled, and her expression was somewhat dazed as she looked at the two people hugging in front of her. Her emotions flashed quickly, and then she lowered her head again without saying a word. Xiao Ya. Sixth Aunt Xiao secretly said to her daughter, "It's all thanks to Jojo, oh no, Crown Princess, that we were able to come out this time. It's all thanks to the Crown Princess' benevolence. Don't have that expression, relax." Sixth Aunt Xiao was afraid that her daughter would offend Arbor, so she hurriedly warned her daughter in a low voice. Xiao Ya's expression became more stiff, even a little unnatural, and her head stiffly turned away. Emolien calmed the little fellow's emotions and asked softly, "What's wrong? Did the Qiao family say something unpleasant?" Arbor shook his head. "Who cares what they said? It's fine, I just suddenly wanted to hug you." After saying that, the little fellow even reached out to tease a certain person's face. Prince Emo was stunned, and a layer of red quietly crept onto his ears. He hugged Arbor and muttered softly, "You can hug me whenever you want. You can hug me for as long as you want. It's best if you don't let go." "You're dreaming," Arbor muttered softly and reached out to push him. "Let's go." Emolien raised her hand to touch her own face. And it was indeed a beautiful face. In order to reassure his mother, Arbor specially arranged for sixth Uncle Qiao and his family to live in a small residence on Shiluo Street. The residence had 2 entrances and was of moderate size. It was more than enough for 3 people to live in. Sixth Aunt Qiao tried to get close to her along the way, but she kept calling her Crown Princess instead of the usual Jojo, and the conversation was awkward everywhere. In addition, the Crown Prince, this great Buddha, was present. Sixth Aunt Qiao and sixth Uncle Qiao were so uneasy that they didn't know where to put their hands and feet. They occasionally spoke along the way, but it was quite awkward. Later, they simply stopped talking. When they arrived at the boundary of Shiluo Street, the carriage stopped at the intersection. There were tents all around, so the passage wasn't very smooth. It would be faster to walk. Emolien held Arbor's hand and led Qiao Laolu and his family to the entrance of the small house. Xiao Ya had been silent all this while. At this moment, she raised her head and quickly scanned the house. Something flashed through her eyes and quickly disappeared. "From now on, you can stay here." Qiao Mu glanced at Xiao Ya, who had her head lowered, before turning to say to sixth Aunt Qiao, "This small residence is basically complete, so you don't need to add anything else. You can directly move in." Yes, thank you, Crown Princess. Thank you." Qiao Lu's aunt hurriedly bowed and expressed her gratitude. Arbor felt a little uncomfortable seeing her being so polite. He sighed softly and said, "If there's nothing else, the Crown Prince and I will take our leave first." Qiao Ya swiftly tugged at her mother's sleeve. Sixth Aunt Qiao froze for a moment before hastily saying with an obsequious smile, Crown Princess, how much food is in this residence? How long will it last our family of 3? Arbor was slightly taken aback and casually said, "It shouldn't be a problem to eat the food until the Lantern Festival. Sister Xiao Ya is also a mystic cultivator, so she can go to the city plaza to accept missions to earn mystic currency. When the time comes, she can use the mystic currency to buy food at the food hall." "Oh." Sixth Uncle Qiao and sixth Aunt Qiao answered obsequiously before sending Arbor and the Crown Prince out the door. The end of the 7th chapter. Fragmented Dreams. Chapter 907. After leaving old Sixth Qiao's home, Arbor felt rather fed up and didn't really want to talk after boarding the carriage. Emolien sat next to her and reached out to rub her small face. "Why are you spacing out? It's enough after doing this. Everyone has their own lives. Let them be. You're upset because of some random people. I'm not happy to see that." When our family was in dire straits in the past, sixth Uncle Chow's family would occasionally send some food over to help us out. Abba sighed and said, I know what Mother is thinking. A drop of water should be repaid with a gushing spring, that's right. We should repay sixth Uncle's kindness. Logically speaking, with our current family circumstances, it shouldn't be a big problem to help if we can. But I keep feeling that. My heart doesn't feel too good. Abba turned to look at Emolien and grabbed his large palm. Did you see sixth aunt's appearance just now? She didn't treat me as a junior at all. She was too courteous and made me feel uncomfortable all over. No, to be precise, it was a hint of flattery, which was too unbearable to look at. In reality, she would rather be like before. However, sixth uncle's family, which used to be simple and unadorned, seemed to have completely vanished into thin air in the torrent of time. I know that the human heart is the most fickle thing, Auber said aloofly. It was me who didn't know how to be flexible and worried about nothing. You're babbling nonsense. Emolien pulled her into his arms and stared at her intently. The human heart is fickle. It's referring to those who sail according to the wind and have unstable minds. I won't change. My feelings for you can be proven by the river of time. Emolien lowered his head and kissed her small cheek. Seeing some melancholy in her expression, he couldn't resist adding, there are plenty of strong-willed people in this world. Take that guy Duanyu for example. Although he looks especially unreliable, his thoughts and willpower aren't something that anyone can change. Auber's mouth twitched. She looked up at that man and couldn't resist laughing. Are you praising him or insulting him? Scoundrel, always bad-mouthing Duanyu behind his back. Of course, it was damage. Emolien pursed her lips. I heard that he invited you to the Lantern Festival. Auber tilted his head and looked at him with a half-smile. Are you not coming? Of course I'm coming. In Xiao Mu's opinion, boys were really quite noisy. When things were good, they were so close that they could wear the same pair of pants. When things were bad, they would kill each other any time and anywhere. When she thought of the Lantern Festival, she would have to drag the 3 little radish heads along with the 2 boys who would fight each other from time to time. Her heart was shrouded in a faint trace of sadness. My Joe's section break. The Marquis of Su-An's estate was located rather far from Min Shun Avenue. Compared to the bustling Min Shun Avenue, the Marquis of Su-An's estate was rather remote. Ever since the 4th princess forced Hu family's old third, the prince consort, to death, the Marquis of Su-An's residence became more and more destitute. Now, even the lintel of the door was peeling off. Only half of the word, "an," was left. When the estate's maidservant passed through the sparse corridor, she cowered to the side when she encountered Hu Yukong. Unexpectedly, young master who didn't even look at her and walked away with his hands behind his back. It looked like he was returning to his own courtyard. He actually didn't come up to touch her? The maidservant dazedly stared at young master whose back. Could it be that red rain was going to fall from the sky? She looked up at the sky. Chapter 908. Creak. Hu Yukong casually kicked open the door to his own courtyard. Looking at the swaying and broken door, he clicked his tongue and shook his head, a trace of disdain flashing through his eyes. What Marquis' estate? With this kind of wealth, it was simply laughable. Hu Yukong walked straight into his room, closed the door, and walked in front of 100 treasure grid. There was no need to mention the shabby appearance of this 100 treasure grid. On top of it was a leaping horse with paint peeling off, as well as a few cheap jade pendants. Hu Yukong turned a button on the lowest level of the 100 treasure grid. With a whoosh, the 100 treasure grid moved to the left, revealing a small secret room behind it. Hu Yukong continued to click his tongue. Not to mention how crude this mechanism was, just this F*King impoverished Marquis' estate, which didn't even have a billionth of his treasures, still gave him a *TTY secret room. In the beginning, he was so excited that he wanted to die. He thought that this guy had really hidden some good stuff, but in the end, there was only a broken copper cauldron, 2 chests of gold ingots, and a few bags of rations. Woo-woo. In the center of the small secret room, a man and woman were tied to a stool, back to back. They looked in horror at the Hu Yukong who walked in. Their mouths were gagged with a rag, so they could only make muffled sounds. Their expressions were also somewhat twisted. Woo woo what? Hu Yukong suddenly stepped forward and kicked the leg of the man on the stool. If I didn't see that your place is clean, do you think I would like to stay in your broken place? It's just borrowing a place. Look at how stingy you are. Hu Yukong kicked him 2 more times, then suddenly smiled maliciously. The person tied to the stool was Hu Yukong himself. Speaking of his bad luck, didn't it start from that day in Spring Dawn Garden? After returning from Spring Dawn Garden after being smashed in the head by a fierce woman, Hu Yukong found someone to treat him. After that, he felt that it was difficult to get rid of the gloominess in his chest. That night, he grabbed a young servant girl to relieve his stuffiness. Who knew that halfway through the good deed, the back of his head would be ruthlessly smashed by someone. His eyes rolled back, and he fainted. When he woke up, he was tied up in this secret room along with the average-looking servant girl. And the most terrifying thing was that this woman, who was so enchanting and beautiful that a single glance from her could seduce people to death, actually turned into a living person in front of him. In the blink of an eye, she turned into Hu Yukong's appearance. It was simply too horrifying. A woman suddenly turned into a man. It wasn't a disguise, but a real transformation of his body. Even his Adam's apple could be seen clearly. This was really too frightening. Especially at that moment, when he saw Hu Yukong smiling at him with his identical face, the real Hu Yukong felt as if he was about to suffocate. You good for nothing, look at how scared you are. Hu Yukong used an unprepossessing man's face to smile like a flirtatious woman. The real Hu Yukong was so scared that his eyes rolled back and he almost fainted on the spot. He never knew that he could smile so horribly. The illusion of looking at himself in the mirror made him shudder. Hey, I won't tease you anymore. The Hu Yukong in front of him, who had an ordinary face, slowly turned into a beautiful woman with pink lips and enchanting eyebrows as the bones in her body cracked. Her voice also changed from a man's voice to a soft female voice. Chapter 909. Once again, he saw the Snake Beauty successfully transform from Hu Yukong into a beautiful woman. Her entire face, height, figure, and fat had all undergone a terrifying transformation. Greatly agitated, Hu Yukong's eyes rolled back as he finally fainted. Meanwhile, the young maidservant tied together with Hu Yukong was also slightly agape. Because of fear and dread, her entire body trembled incessantly, and cold sweat rolled down her forehead as if she had just been fished out of a river. Tisk, tsk, tsk. The Snake Beauty sighed and swayed her snake-like waist as she walked up to the young maidservant. The Snake Beauty slightly lowered her waist, and her face was practically pressed against the young maidservant's face. Her fragrant breath blew past the young maidservant's face. Don't be afraid, don't worry, I'm a good person. HM? The young maidservant widened her eyes in horror, and her brain seemed to have lost the ability to speak due to the agitation. She could only nod while trembling. The Snake Beauty giggled and walked to the table on the side without consulting anyone. She then rolled up her sleeves and started to grind ink and lay out paper. If it weren't for the fact that this Hu Yukong is so useless, why would I come back now? Sigh, she had finally managed to sneak into the Chow residence, but in the end, the number of times she had seen this little fiend could be counted on one hand. Moreover, she would stare at her with extreme vigilance every time. She really didn't know where she had exposed herself. They clearly had different faces, so how could she see through the clues every time? Ever since she had failed to find her in Bailon City, she could only return to the Mo Kingdom capital to look for her. Unfortunately, it was difficult to get close to her even after finding her. How vexing! Holding the ink brush, the Snake Beauty pondered for a while with her chin propped up. Then, with a slight smile, she suddenly lowered her head and started scribbling. After she finished writing, she picked up the entire piece of paper and pouted her small mouth to blow at the ink that hadn't dried yet. A poppy smile spread across her beautiful small face. Squeak, 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 squeak. In the Mo Kingdom capital Central Plaza, there was an extremely large and long mission board constructed from lapis lazuli. All kinds of missions were posted on it for people to choose from. Many special operations teams would come here every few days to take on a mission in order to maintain their daily necessities. On this day, as usual, there were people coming and going in the city's Central Plaza. There were too many to count of those who were accepting and handing in missions. When teams that were familiar with each other met, they would politely greet each other and ask each other questions. It was almost noon today, and there were quite a few team members gathered in front of the mission panel. Just like before, they were searching for the mission they wanted to take on according to the various mission lists. Then, everyone's eyes fell on a piece of crimson paper that was stained with ink and had a few words written in flamboyant calligraphy. That wasn't an ordinary mission announcement, but, "Make way, please make way." The vice captain of the Giant Bear Squad, Hannah Mushroom, moved her large body and squeezed into the crowd. "Why are you all in a daze in front of the panel? Hurry up and leave after taking the mission slip. All of you are standing here. Hey, look, are my eyes playing tricks on me? You're not seeing things. This is a visit. At the Spring Lantern Festival, he must take away the Northern Prince Mo's favorite. Notice is hereby given. Signed by Ding Ting Ding." Hua Gu's eyes almost popped out of their sockets as she shouted, "Holy shit! Am I seeing things? Ding Ting Ding has issued a challenge to His Highness the Crown Prince." Ding Ting Ding? What Ding Ting Ding? Is it that Ding Ting Ding? Which Ding Ting Ding is there in this world? F***CK, Ding Ting Ding has gone overboard this time. Wait. Chapter 9-10. Wow, Ding Ting Ding is going against His Highness the Crown Prince this time. How can this be the same as those people in the past? Oh my god. I'll bet with you that Ding Ting Ding's plan to steal this time will definitely fail. What kind of person is His Highness? He won't let that bastard get away with it. The crowd was in a frenzy as they discussed the matter. Loud noises could be heard everywhere. Guess what treasure His Highness the Crown Prince treasures? Could it be some kind of heaven-defying cultivation technique or something like that? Or some kind of miraculous elixir? Holy shit, Ding Ting Ding can't be coveting His Highness's vast territory, right? Out of the way, out of the way! Everyone, disperse and make way for His Highness. Everyone, out of the way. Don't crowd this place. 2 rows of guards ran over and pushed the crowd to the sides. That lapis lazuli panel was revealed from the bustling crowd. A tall, ink-colored figure slowly approached the lapis lazuli panel. He coldly stared at the piece of red paper fluttering in the wind. He raised his right hand slightly and suddenly clenched his 5 fingers. That piece of red paper flew into his hand with a whoosh. The man's eyes lowered as he coldly stared at the piece of red paper in his hand. No one knew this better than he did. Whatever heaven-defying cultivation technique, miraculous elixir, or even the vast territory, none of them were his treasures. Ding Ting Ding, that damned bastard, actually wanted to extend his demonic claws to his treasure. He wanted to kill this guy with his own hands. Emolien's eyes were cold as he tightly clenched the piece of red paper in his hand. When he opened his hand again, the paper had already turned into nothingness and scattered with the wind. Over 1,000 people had gathered in the city's Central Plaza, but no one dared to speak. His Highness's deterrence was truly a bit terrifying. Everyone could tell that the man was in a very bad mood right now. Who still dared to provoke His Highness at this juncture? It wasn't like they were tired of living. Although no one dared to say it out loud, they were still rather curious. They were even looking forward to the arrival of the Lantern Festival. Ding Ting Ding had been undefeated for many years and was known as the thief sage Ding Ting Ding. They really didn't know if he would fail to steal His Highness's item this time. If he failed, that would break his record of 0 defeats. Several days later, in the estate of the Marquis of Jiyuan, when Aba heard the report that the goods from Southern Bailey had arrived, she guessed that it must be her batch of ebony. When he ran out to take a look, he saw that the entire manor was surrounded by the children of the Hidden Night Pavilion, leaving not even a drop of water to trickle through. There were more than 30,000 pieces of ebony delivered. Arbor was in a good mood. For the time being, she planned to throw this batch of ebony into her inner world. However, she wouldn't foolishly put it away at the front door. It was better to let someone drag it into the house first. She didn't want anyone to suspect why her inner world was so big. After the things were moved into his courtyard, Arbor asked Xiao Yao, who was beside him, "Xiao Yao, do you feel that there are a lot more people around me these days? Why do I feel like this court is being surrounded by people from all directions?" Xiao Yao's mouth twitched. "Miss, Ding Ting Ding has already challenged His Highness to a battle. How can His Highness not be nervous?" "Oh, he's here to steal from him." Arbor nodded. "Stealing from him isn't stealing from me. Why did he get so many people to surround me?" "Miss, Ding Ting Ding wants to steal His Highness's most beloved. Isn't that you?" Chapter 9:11. Arbor turned to look at Xiao Yao in astonishment. "It can't be." "What can't be?" Xiao Yao was about to be defeated by her little master. "I'm a living person. Doesn't he only steal things? Why would he steal from me?" Arbor stared blankly for a moment before shaking her head and saying, "Doesn't he have to provide food for me even if he steals from me? That's not a loss." Xiao Yao didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she looked at her. "My dear master, that Ding Ting Ding is clearly here to provoke His Highness. Do you think he lacks that bit of food from you?" Emolienne had been so busy these past 2 days that she didn't come over. Who knew if she was secretly investigating Ding Ting Ding's whereabouts? Arbor was in a rather good mood after cleaning up her ebony pieces. She turned to Xiao Yao and said, "Xiao Yao, let's add more dishes tonight." Xiao Yao didn't make much of a fuss when she heard about adding more dishes this time. She looked at her worried expression with a bitter expression. "What's wrong? You're not even happy about adding more dishes." Arbor went up to grab her little hand and said, let's go. Come with me to the kitchen to take a look and see what dishes we should add. Do you want to drink chicken soup?" "Miss, why aren't you worried at all?" It turned out that when Miss received the news a few days ago, she was still in a daze and didn't know that Ding Ting Ding's target this time was her. No wonder she had been so carefree these past few days. "What am I worried about?" Arbor snorted disdainfully. "If he dares to come, I'll kill him while I'm at it. Then everything will be fine." Xiao Yao turned her head and saw that her miss's expression was especially serious and didn't look like she was joking. She couldn't help but burst out laughing. "That's right. My miss is so powerful. How could she be captured by that brat successfully? Let's go." Arbor pointed in the direction of the kitchen and dragged Xiao Yao away. "Xiao Yao, do you want to ask Emolienne to withdraw some men? I heard that my father went out for a walk yesterday and almost couldn't enter the house when he came home." Xiao Yao hurriedly shook her head. "Let's not. Tomorrow was the Spring Lantern Festival. That Ding Ting Ding had said that he would come to take the young miss away at high. I don't know if he'll try to be sneaky and secretly change the time. It'll be hard to guard against that." "Take me away?" Darling Chow rolled her eyes. She made it sound like she was an object. She was a living person. If he said he wanted to come and get it, would she be able to foolishly follow him? It's not like he's sick. All right, don't worry. We'll worry about tomorrow's matters tomorrow. Let's have a good meal tonight." When Xiao Yao thought of the chicken soup that Miss mentioned, she couldn't help smacking her lips and giggling. The next day, Emolienne personally came to the Marquis of Jiyuan's estate to welcome her father-in-law's family into the palace. The Lantern Festival would be held at noon today, and the people attending were all the people she had met at the New Year's banquet that day. They were the families of third-rank officials and above. The banquet would end at Shen, and everyone could leave the palace to move about freely. The Luo family troupe would be singing in the palace for the entire day today, so the madams and young misses who were interested had gone to Clearwater Fine Park early to watch the opera. The entire Mo Kingdom capital was in a carnival tonight, and there was also a grand lantern festival. All the upper-class madams and young misses planned to join in the fun. The carriage entered the palace unimpeded. Emolienne was summoned to the old great king's study. Before leaving, he repeatedly urged her to be careful and safe before leaving in a hurry. "Miss, there are many people today, so you really have to be careful." Xiao Yao looked like she was facing a great enemy, vigilantly checking the people walking past them from time to time. Chapter 9:12. That Ding Ting Ding said that he'll come to steal at night. According to Xiao Yao's calculations, that's when you'll be heading to the Lantern Festival. Why don't we cancel the lantern viewing event? Xiao Yao hurriedly said. No. That guy isn't qualified enough for me to change my schedule. Arba curved her lips and snorted. Sister, what are you talking about? Qiao Lin leaned close to her and asked in a small voice as her eyes turned shrewdly. Nothing. Arba raised her hand to rub her sister's head. Qiao Lin reached out to hold her arm. Sister, it's still early. Let's go sit over there for a while. As soon as Arba moved, Xiao Yao followed closely by her side and followed the two sisters in that direction. Wei Ziqin still found it strange. Xiao Yao, did something happen these past few days? I keep feeling that little Mo's expression was a bit off when he looked at our Jojo today. He looked so nervous. Xiao Yao didn't dare to say anything more to Wei Ziqin. She hurriedly shook her head and said, No. Madam, you don't need to worry. His Highness is so capable. Don't worry, he won't let anything happen to Mississippi. The mother and daughters walked towards a waterside pavilion in Clearwater Fine Park. When they got closer, they saw a group of people walking along the waterside pavilion from the end of the winding white jade corridor. The one leading the group was a girl with a rather haughty attitude. Wei Ziqin recognized at a glance that this girl was the Zheng family's third miss, Her Highness Consort Zheng's niece. As for the two people behind her, they were no stranger to her. The Marquis of Placation's estate's third Miss Su Mingzhu and fourth Miss Su Mingxin. Wei Ziqin's footsteps paused, and she hesitated whether to walk over to greet them. Looking at her two daughters, they had already walked over confidently, hand in hand. Her head hurt when she saw this banquet. If interacting less with people could save her trouble, Wei Ziqin would be happy to hide away. The two groups met in the treasured jade pavilion. Crown Princess. Zheng San wasn't stupid. He nodded and bowed when he saw Arba. Su Mingzhu gritted her teeth and tightly clenched the handkerchief in her hand. She followed her fourth sister, Su Mingxin, and bowed to Arba while cursing her in her heart. During their encounter at the Spring Dawn Garden, she had been seriously injured. If it wasn't for the fact that her family had taken out pills to treat her injuries, she wouldn't have been able to walk in just a few days. Su Mingzhu hated Arba so much that her teeth were itching. However, she had learned her lesson from being impulsive last time. This time, she held her breath and stood aside. She didn't say anything and just looked at Arba coldly. Third young Miss Zhang smiled at Arba and said, This jade treasure pavilion has beautiful and elegant scenery. If the Crown Princess doesn't mind, would you like to sit down and have a drink with me? Arba looked at her deeply and shook his head. No need. After saying that, he pulled his sister and turned to leave. Behind him, Zhang San bit her lip, feeling rather aggrieved. Wei Ziqin's heart was also in turmoil. Seeing that her daughter didn't want to mingle with these girls, she couldn't help but sigh in relief. She nodded repeatedly and followed her daughter out of the pavilion. Unexpectedly, before Arba could take 2 steps, she was bumped into by a maidservant who pounced on her. Her clean dress was immediately stained with some tea foam, looking very indecent. Arba looked at that maidservant coldly. You did it on purpose. That maidservant trembled in fright. Her legs went soft, and she knelt on the ground. She repeatedly kowtowed and begged for mercy. Crown Princess, have mercy. Crown Princess, have mercy. Very good. Arba's lips curled into a cold arc. I'll fulfill your wish. Chapter 9:13. Is there anyone who doesn't have eyes and dares to barge in like you on a perfectly good road? This was the Imperial Palace. Which servant girl could be so reckless and live for so long? If she was so blind, she would have been played to death by the imperial concubines long ago. She could tell at a glance that it was fake, yet she still wanted to deceive her? Qiao Lin also pursed her lips with a displeased expression. Even with her intelligence, she could see that there was something fishy about this matter, let alone her astute and sharp older sister. The young royal maid was so frightened that her face turned pale, and she kept peeking at Arber's expression. When he heard Xiao Mu call for help, his entire body went limp on the ground. On the side, Zhang San's complexion also turned slightly pale. She didn't expect that the crown princess would be so ruthless and really want to punish that royal maid without saying anything. She didn't follow the script at all and was simply terrifying. When Lightning and the other person suddenly appeared, the noble ladies were all frightened. They watched helplessly as the two hidden guards dragged the person away. When the royal maid's miserable screams came from afar, third young Miss Zheng's small face turned deathly pale. Arber stroked the dirt on her skirt and looked coldly at Zhang San. "Didn't you say you wanted to treat me to tea?" Zhang San nervously gripped a corner of her skirt and repeatedly nodded while trembling with fear. "Yes, yes. Come, come, prepare the tea." The tea was quickly prepared again. At this time, Su Mingzhu was a bit scared. She felt that the crown princess suddenly staying behind wasn't a good thing. She clearly said that she didn't want to drink tea. Arber sat in front of them. Her harsh gaze forced the young ladies to not dare to sit down. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly and stood in front of her with their hands hanging down. She leisurely picked up the teacup, sniffed it, and said indifferently, "Top-quality snow sprout tea. It looks really good. It's good that the crown princess likes it." Third young Miss Zhang sighed in relief and bowed respectfully. "Come here." Arber suddenly raised her head and beckoned to Zhang San. "This cup of tea is for you." Third young Miss Zhang was so frightened that her whole body trembled. Instead of advancing, she retreated several steps. Xiao Mu gazed at her coldly. "You look so guilty and fearful. It looks like you did something shameful. Did you add something to this cup of tea?" Third Miss Zhang shook her head frantically. "No, no. How could this little girl dare to do something like murder the crown prince consort in broad daylight with so many people watching?" Arber nodded in understanding. "Then you're worried that I've done something to the tea. What if I insist that you drink it now?" Arber's ice-cold eyes stared deeply at third Miss Zhang, whose forehead was drenched in cold sweat. With a slight lift of her chin, Xiao Yao immediately walked out from behind her. Taking the teacup from her hand, she strode forward and unceremoniously reached out to pinch third young Miss Zheng's cheeks, pressing her entire body backward until her waist was slightly bent. "Don't be so shameless when the crown princess gives you a reward." Xiao Yao coldly shouted and directly poured the cup of rather hot tea into third young Miss Zheng's mouth. "Mmh." Third young Miss Zheng, who was in great pain from her cheeks being pinched, resisted repeatedly with a terrified expression. She was forced to drink more than half of the tea, which splashed all over her head and face. Bam! The teacup rolled to the ground and shattered into several pieces. Third young Miss staggered and sat limply on the ground. Tea seeped out of the corner of her mouth, and she coughed awkwardly as she bent over, as if desperately trying to spit out the tea that was poured into her mouth. Chapter 9:14. When Su Mingxin saw that Arber was enraged and had already knelt down, how could she still dare to speak? She was only an insignificant concubine's daughter. It was already good enough that she could play it safe. She was only afraid that she would be implicated by her foolish older sister. Su Mingzhu retreated many steps and hid to the side with an extremely unsightly expression. How could she still dare to speak up for third Miss Zheng at this time? "Young master," that palace maid confessed. She quickly walked to Arber's side, her words causing third Miss Zheng's expression to change greatly. Arber nodded at her. Soon, the pale-faced palace maid was dragged over like a dead dog. She did not have any external injuries on her body, but it was obvious that she was completely unharmed. "Speak." Arber coldly glanced at that palace maid. "Are you a member of Sephora Flower Palace?" That little palace maid trembled with fear and trepidation as she nodded her head. Third Miss Zhang was furious when she saw this and couldn't help but roar, "Impudent! This young lady has never seen you in Sephora Flower Palace before. Don't think of randomly accusing people." The little palace maid tearfully glanced at Third Miss Zhang and couldn't help but wail, "Miss, this servant really can't take it any more. Just now, those hidden guards made her, an ordinary woman, suffer the pain of having her tendons torn and bones dislocated. How could she bear it? It was simply more unbearable than death." Third Miss Zhang sat on the ground in a sorry state, the corners of her mouth tightly pursed as she glared fiercely at the palace maid. Her gaze seemed to be saying, "Do you think that now that you've confessed in front of the crown princess, your highness consort Zhang will still let you off?" The little palace maid trembled so much that her entire body swayed. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at Third Miss Zhang before turning to look at the palace maid. "Why don't I take a guess? What does Young he want to do this time, unwilling to be left out?" "If I had fallen into your trap, then I would have had to follow you, who had atoned for your crimes by meritorious service, to change clothes, right?" Qiao Mu's cold gaze landed on the junior royal maid as sharp as a knife. "Let me think, where do you want to lead me to?" Arbor slowly stood up and approached the palace maid step by step. "You want to lead me to Young he, right? Where are you going?" "Young he must have arranged a miscarriage show and is waiting for me." Arbor's eyebrows curved as he looked at the palace maid with a mocking expression. The little palace maid widened her eyes in horror. She still hadn't said anything? The crown princess had already guessed most of it. It was very simple. Arbor had exposed Young he's fake pregnancy at the New Year's banquet. With Young he's temperament, she would definitely not let Arbor keep this secret. She would take advantage of the situation to have a miscarriage. Of course, it would be even better if the crown princess could suffer a great misfortune during this miscarriage. Thus, Young he's plan was very easy to guess, and Arbor was pretty much right on the mark. In the palace, Arbor was always on guard and always kept an eye out, so how could she fall into Consort Zhang's trap? "You slut!" Third Miss Zhang struggled to get up and bared her fangs, wanting to push that palace maid to the ground. She believed that the palace maid had secretly leaked the secret, which was why the situation had turned out this way. "Tie her up," Arbor bluntly rebuked. Xiao Yao immediately took out a thick hemp rope and tightened it in her hand before walking over to Third Miss Zhang. "The Great King has arrived. Kneel." The old Great King of Mo Kingdom walked over with a face full of anger. When he saw the situation inside the Jade Pavilion, he couldn't help but angrily shout, "Crown Princess!" Chapter 9:15. Qiao Mu coldly turned her head around and shot her gaze at the king, who was charging over in fury. Behind the great king was a Taoist priest in his 40s with a clear temperament. Dressed in green robes, he appeared to have the air of a transcendent being. Gong Chang'an wiped away the sweat on his forehead as he followed behind them with small steps. Apart from the great king, the crown prince and a group of civil and military officials also quickly walked over. Arbor greets the great king. Arbor calmly bowed. Without waiting for the great king to speak, he naturally wouldn't let himself be wronged and straightened up. "You!" The great king's expression was filled with rage. Before he could speak, the crown prince had already flashed in front of the crown princess. "Disgraceful thing!" The great king opened his mouth to scold his son, but when he looked up, he saw Empress Zhao walking over with many concubines and noble ladies. After the greeting, Empress Zhao calmly said, "This concubine heard that Consort Zhang just had a miscarriage in Sephora Flower Palace. This is truly too unfortunate. A while ago at the New Year's banquet, little sister noble consort seemed to be doing quite well. This happened so suddenly that I'm afraid there's something fishy going on." The great king instantly exploded like a lit firecracker. When he received the news just now, he couldn't keep his cool. His son, whom he had gotten at such an old age, was mysteriously gone. How could he not be furious? If he hadn't lost his rationality due to anger, he wouldn't have directly stood up and led all the civil and military officials here to settle the score with the crown princess. Now, His son had clearly made his stance firm and stood on his wife's side. With so many people present, the great king found it difficult to back down. Daoist Dayu, please speak. The great king smirked and coldly said. It was that sage-like Taoist priest who took a step forward. His gaze swept over Arbor in a strange manner, and then he said indifferently, "This humble Taoist has calculated that there is a vicious aura coming from the southeast. It will soar into the heavens and transform into a blade that will cut towards Sephora Flower Palace. I just reminded the great king that this murderous aura might be harmful to the great king's unborn children." Priest Dayu shook his head and sighed. "I didn't expect news of her ladyship's miscarriage to arrive so soon." Mo Lien sneered, "Taoist priest, if that's the case, then you're a person who can predict destiny. Why don't you help me divine my fortune for this month? If there's even the slightest mistake, I'll take your life." "Crown Prince!" the great king shouted angrily. He hadn't expected the Crown Prince to be so disrespectful to Priest Dayu in front of so many officials. Although Priest Dayu had been in the palace for less than 10 days, his predictions were always accurate. He could even provide the old great king with pills that could relieve his body's pressure. The old great king felt that those pills were even better than the body-strengthening pills provided by the Qin estate's patriarch. After taking them, he indeed felt much more energetic. The great king was displeased that the crown prince treated Priest Dayu in such a manner. However, Prince Mo didn't give the Taoist priest any face at all. "Withdraw. What vicious aura! It's all non-existent. If you dare to be disrespectful to my crown princess, I guarantee that even the great king won't be able to save your life." Crown Prince. The great king was truly furious this time. Wasn't his wife-protecting demon a bit too much? How could he embarrass his old father in front of so many civil and military officials? How infuriating! Empress Zhao hastily walked up to tug on her son's sleeve and comforted him. "Crown Prince, how can you speak to royal father like that?" Chapter 916. Young he had a miscarriage, and all of you rushed over to find the crown princess. Don't you think this is the biggest joke in the world? Your Highness, this is a vicious person. She's not suitable to be the crown princess of a country. Priest Dayu looked honest and sincere as he earnestly tried to persuade the crown prince. "Stinky priest, what did you say?" Jolin shouted angrily. She was like a lioness that was about to explode. Her hair stood on end. Crown Prince Mo mercilessly slapped the Taoist priest's cheek. However, the Taoist priest shifted his body to the side and escaped from the crown prince's palm wind. He was as fast as an afterimage as he stood steadily in front of Qiao Mu. Abba could clearly see a trace of mockery in Priest Dayu's eyes. It was as if he was mocking her for overestimating herself. She came from a humble background, yet she wanted to fly up the branches and become a phoenix. She wanted to be the crown princess of a country? But why? It was her first time meeting this person. She could clearly feel a strong hostility from this person. Mo Lien's anger accumulated in his eyes. He suddenly drew a circle with his left hand and was about to launch a fire attack. His hand was suddenly grasped by Abba's soft little hand. The storm-like anger in his heart was instantly soothed by her little kitten claw-like hand. The dark clouds parted to see the blazing sun. In a trance, it was a sunny day. This change could be seen by everyone present as long as they weren't blind. They couldn't help but exclaim in their hearts at the power of the crown princess. Their willful His Highness the Crown Prince had fallen into the hands of the crown princess like this. "Stinky priest, what do you mean? Young He's miscarriage this time was caused by my vicious aura?" Big sister. Qiao Lin was very anxious in her heart. How could elder sister say such words without any hesitation? What if she gave others a groundless title of Heavenly Calamity Star, or something like that? What should she do? Unfortunately, I happen to know the real reason behind Yong He's miscarriage. Abba's sleeves fluttered. Taoist Dayu, who had been paying attention to her all this time, subconsciously took a small step back. 2 dictum talismans floated in front of her. With a whoosh, they turned into 2 streaks of light, directly pouncing onto third Miss Zheng and the young royal maid behind her, one on the left and one on the right. "What are you doing?" When the great king saw the two talismans, his eyes couldn't help but bulge. He cast a dissatisfied look at his son. "I already told you not to buy those messy talismans for the crown princess to play with. You all know third Miss Zheng, right? Why don't we let her tell us what young he wants to do to me?" "Crown princess, what did you do to my daughter?" State Uncle Zhang didn't know why, but he felt guilty and flustered without any reason, and he hurriedly walked out of the crowd to berate her. Abba glanced at him coldly, then turned to ask, "Third Miss, tell everyone what your aunt instructed you to do." Third Miss Zheng began to recite Consort Zheng's instructions in full detail. When she talked about how Young he sent the young royal maid over to cooperate with third Miss Zheng in plotting against the crown princess, planning to use a scheme to lure the crown princess to Her Highness Young he's temporary place of labor, the officials and officials of the court all looked at each other. All the officials looked at each other, not knowing if they should immediately disappear and let the king deal with this family matter. Yet the great king's expression was rather unsightly. Chapter 9:17. Shut up. You unfilial daughter. What nonsense are you babbling about? Zhang Chao's face darkened as he strode over and slapped his own daughter across the face. Third Miss Zheng's head fell to the ground, yet she continued to recite her previous words over and over again about how her aunt had schemed to frame the crown princess. Zhang Chao immediately turned around and knelt down in front of the great king, crying out with a grief-stricken expression, "Great king, it's that talisman, there's something wrong with that talisman. That talisman made my daughter delirious. She's completely spouting nonsense." "Ignorant and ill-informed person," Abba coldly said, "haven't you heard of the dictum talisman? It would only make people reveal the truth. If Lord Zheng didn't believe it. If you don't believe me, I have another one here. You can use it to test its authenticity." Zhang Chao took a step back in fright. He definitely didn't want to use that dictum talisman. If he blurted out disrespectful words to the great king in a moment of carelessness, then wouldn't all his previous bootlicking be for naught? Demon talisman. Zhang Chao could only insist that the crown princess had used a demon talisman. He scrambled over to the great king's feet and cried out in a tearful voice, "Her Highness noble consort wouldn't do that. Please investigate clearly, great king." "Great king, do you still not understand?" Abba's cold voice continued to sound. When the civil and military officials came into contact with the young lady's dark, eerie eyes, they couldn't help but feel a chill run down their spines. In order to scheme against me and frame me, Yong he didn't hesitate to use the child in her womb as the price to target me. Great king, can't you see such a simple matter? Abba took a step closer, and the old great king actually unwittingly took a step back. The depths of the girl's eyes were engraved with an abyss of coldness and arrogance. No one would be able to look straight at her and would have to avoid her gaze. Why was Yong he so sure that as long as she lured me over, the child would definitely have a miscarriage? Will the crime be framed on my head? The old king's entire body turned cold as he clenched his fists slightly. He looked at his daughter-in-law in disbelief. Because she had already calculated the time and did not hesitate to use this child to frame me. Because she killed the little prince with her own hands, intending to push me into the abyss. Impossible! The great king's eyes trembled as he roared. Great king, in fact, you already have the answer in your heart, don't you? Abba said coldly, then returned to the crown prince's side and said no more. Priest Dayu, on the other hand, looked at her with a heavy gaze. There was a strange light in his eyes. This gaze made Abba feel uncomfortable all over. She suddenly said coldly, "Qingwan, kill him for me." Everyone's heart suddenly jumped because the girl had suddenly and decisively issued an order. Priest Dayu was right about one thing. The crown princess was indeed vicious, and her murderous aura was indescribable. Screech! The giant cyan bird suddenly descended above everyone's heads, and abruptly unleashed an ice wind and snow rain at Priest Dayu. Qingwan, a heavenly bird. Priest Dayu's gaze changed in shock, as if he had never expected that the crown princess would attack him in the palace at the slightest disagreement. He really didn't understand darling Qiao's temperament. Priest Dayu had previously wanted to kill her, so she wouldn't let him off. Whoosh! An icicle struck Priest Dayu's chest. Chapter 9:18. Aba pressed forward, the ferrule in her hand crackling with sparks. She coordinated perfectly with Qing Wan and struck Priest Dayu's shoulder blade with a thunderous blow. Priest Dayu couldn't dodge the blow to his shoulder blade in order to avoid the icicle in front of his chest. She thought she would be able to break the old Taoist's shoulder blade, but unexpectedly, the irresistible force didn't hurt Priest Dayu at all. It was as if she had hit a pile of cotton. Aba's heart skipped a beat. Oh no, this person's cultivation was unfathomable. It should be much higher than hers. The Taoist priest even turned his head to give her a strange smile. A giant beast's claw suddenly appeared in front of his chest like a third hand and violently struck Aba's chest. If she was hit, she would be half crippled even if she didn't die. Qing Wan twisted her body in midair and retracted her wings, turning into human form. She held a long ice sword in her hand and slashed at the old Taoist priest's neck with lightning speed. If the thieving Taoist priest wantonly attacked Aba, when Aba was injured, his head would be ruthlessly chopped off by Qing Wan's ice sword. The old Taoist priest didn't dare to act rashly. He could only lean to the side and lean his body to dodge Qing Wan's sharp stab. At the same time, a fierce purple flame with monstrous anger turned into a roaring fire dragon in midair. It fiercely penetrated the old Taoist priest's body from behind and gave him a violent dragon strike. With a boom, he was smashed to the ground. There was absolute silence. All the officials trembled in fear, almost unable to look directly at the crown prince's anger. The old great king also shut his mouth at this time. The crown prince was furious as if someone had touched his reverse scale. After that fire dragon kill, a slender jet-black long sword condensed in his hand. With a sweep, the terrifying vibrating force immediately flattened all the flowers and grass on the ground, directly rolling up dust. The slender Wuyue sword left behind a series of afterimages, as if thousands of swords were spinning in front of everyone. In an instant, he arrived in front of the old Taoist. The old Taoist was about to die on the spot. Bang! After a loud sound, a thick smoke enveloped everyone. They couldn't help but cough as they tried to sweep away the billowing smoke in front of them. Dozens of members of the hidden night pavilion appeared behind the crown prince. "Search the entire city and kill without mercy," the crown prince said coldly and expressionlessly. Yes. Countless figures flew away. The crown prince's face was filled with rage, and his anger had yet to dissipate. He grabbed Aba's small hand and pulled her with large strides as he walked out of Clearwater Fine Park. Everyone was silent, including the great king and Empress Zhao. They seemed to be at a loss for words. The crown prince suddenly stopped and looked back at them coldly. "You'd better not challenge my bottom line again. Otherwise, I'll flip the sky. Destroy this land. Don't you dare touch my woman. I will make you regret ever coming to this world." Absolute silence. "Father." The crown prince stared coldly at his father, his phoenix eyes burning with intense hatred. "That enchantress, if you can't bear to kill her, then let your son do it for you." Zhang Chao collapsed to the ground, trembling as he looked at the crown prince, who had left in anger. The old great king was also shocked, but he couldn't make a sound. When his gaze met with his daughter-in-law's, he couldn't help but tremble. "Great king, Yong, he killed your youngest son. Can this be forgiven?" Chapter 9:19. Emo Lien grabbed Aba's little hand and led her out of the palace without looking back. He threw all thoughts of the Lantern Festival banquet and the officials to the back of his mind. The streets were already bustling with activity, and there were more and more people. The two of them shuttled through the crowd, and miraculously, no one dared to get close to them. They all opened up a path for them on both sides. Emo Lien. Aba puffed up her little cheeks and tugged at his tightly clenched hand. She called out delicately, "Emolien." Emolien led her into a secluded alley and stopped under a winding stone arch bridge. Beside the bridge stood a 3-meter-tall stone pagoda. There were several green plants planted beside the pagoda. In the winter, the leaves had all fallen off. He stood there, his back tall and slender. Arba couldn't help but tug at his sleeve again. "Lien." Emolien suddenly turned around and pulled her into his arms with one hand. He pressed her tightly against his chest and stroked her black hair with the other. The man pursed his lips and lowered his head. After a while he said, "I'm sorry. I've made you suffer again. Let's not go to the palace anymore. I won't let anything like this happen to you again, okay?" He rested his chin on her little head and said unhappily, "Look at you. I'm not even that angry. Why are you so angry?" Arba tugged at a strand of her hair and comforted her softly. "Your father is an old fool. It's not like you don't know that. Why are you angry with him? Moreover, you were very rude to your parents just now." "Don't do that again," Arba said softly. "They're not nice to you. I'm angry at them." Emolien rubbed her head in frustration. "Because you're my baby, I hope that the whole world will treat you like a baby." Emolien's thoughts were too easy to understand. Arba's eyes flickered, and he nudged his head in his arms. "Then, your mother already has a knot in her heart. If you do this, I'm afraid they'll dislike me even more. Don't worry about Young-hee." Arba's eyes flashed with a cold light. "Since she dares to scheme against me, I will not let her have a good end. I'll get someone to deal with her." So what if she made her father unhappy? This time, Emolien had steeled his heart to want her dead. This woman had crossed his bottom line too far. She actually thought of such a malicious method to frame his Chow Chow. The plot did not succeed because of Jojo's cleverness, not because of that B***TCH's benevolence. Young-hee has been doted on for so many years. She is your father's true love. Arba hugged his waist and looked up at his gloomy face. He raised his hand and stroked his forehead. "True love." Emolien snorted, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "I want her to lose everything. She can't enter the royal tomb until she dies. If he did not grind this person's bones to dust, he would not be able to get rid of the hatred in his heart." Lien. Chow Mu wanted to console him a bit more, but he hugged her tightly instead. "No one can bully you," he said in a low voice beside her ear. Arba thought about it and let it go. "Don't look at how this guy usually likes to ask you if you're okay, as if he's asking for your opinion. In fact, he has already made a decision in his heart. Anyway, she just had to do it before he did. And she just happened to learn an interesting talisman. She wanted to find someone to try it on. Chapter 920. When young, he was dragged out of Sephora Flower Palace and sent to the Cold Palace. The cut on her leg was still bleeding incessantly. Nanny Sue wiped her tears and pulled at the few old nannies along the way. But how could she be a match for those burly nannies? After a few slaps, she couldn't make a sound. The great king has decreed that Consort Zheng's heart is vicious and her morals are lacking. In order to frame the crown princess, she wantonly plotted to murder the royal heir. No one can surpass her viciousness and treachery. From this day forth, she will be demoted to a palace servant and placed in Chonghua Palace. Without an imperial decree, she is not allowed to take half a step out of Chonghua Palace for the rest of her life. Zheng Ru collapsed on the ground. Seeing this, Mammy Sue hastily ran forward and tried her best to help her up. Gong Chong and couldn't help but sigh when he saw the wretched master and servant pair. He rolled up the imperial decree in his hand and said, "Zheng Ru, the great king is very disappointed in you. In order to frame the crown princess, you actually harmed the flesh and blood in your womb with your own hands. You even caused a serious conflict between the great king and His Highness the Crown Prince. This matter has already been investigated. From this day forth, you can stay in Chonghua Palace with peace of mind and properly reflect. Let's go." Gong Chong and turned around and led 4 or 5 old nannies and a few young eunuchs out of Chonghua Palace. Eunuch, eunuch. Mammy Su lifted her skirt and knelt. She scrambled forward on her knees and wept miserably. Eunuch, please put in a few good words in front of the great king. Our imperial consort was wrongly accused, eunuch. She absolutely didn't harm the royal heir. The crown princess's heart was simply punishable by death. She clearly knew that their imperial consort wasn't pregnant at all, but she told the great king that Her Highness the noble consort had personally harmed the royal heir. What a terrible woman she is! Gong Chong abruptly stopped and turned back, a cold glint flashing through his eyes. Seize her. Slap him. 2 ferocious old mamas immediately rushed over and clamped down on Mammy Su's arms from both sides. Pa. 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 Remember this clearly. From today onwards, there was no empress. You are an old nanny, and she is just an old palace maid who is not favored. Let's go. Gong Chong waved his hand and led everyone out of the cold palace. When he went out, he couldn't help but look back at the people inside. He secretly warned himself, don't be as stupid as the women inside. After causing so much trouble, she ended up in the cold palace. What a joke. On the way back to the central palace, Empress Zhao was silent for a long time before she turned to look at old nanny Huaxian, who was walking slowly beside the carriage. Do you really think that the crown princess doesn't know that Zheng Ru's stomach is fake? Huaxian slightly raised her head and bowed to Empress Zhao. Actually, Empress already has an answer in her heart, isn't that so? Empress Zhao only felt a slight chill in her heart. This time, Yong He really went for wool and came home shorn. She originally wanted to collaborate with Priest Dayu and frame the crown princess for the child's miscarriage. Who would have expected that she would end up with the bad reputation of murdering her own child and framing the crown princess? Yong He could forget about crawling out of Chonghua Palace for the rest of her life. Empress, after going through so many things, you should be very clear. Don't rashly offend this little prickly head. Once she pricks people, you will die. Empress Zhao felt that she might need to re-evaluate this crown princess. When the carriage passed by the outer walls of Chonghua Palace, Empress Zhao turned back to take a look. Chapter 921. Morning Cloud Restaurant. When Duan Yu received the news, he immediately ran over. When he came upstairs, he saw the crown prince and involuntarily pursed his lips. Why is he here too? Jojo, where are your younger siblings? We were in the palace earlier, so we left early. Abba said dryly, they should have returned home already. Duan Yu sat down across from the two and poured himself a wine cup. Speak, what happened now? After saying that, he glanced at the crown prince. What's up with this guy? Don't think he couldn't tell that the crown prince was sitting there with a dark face and a gloomy aura of displeasure emanating from him. It's already been resolved. Abba rubbed his cheek non-committally. By the way, Duan Yu, didn't you say you were going to take me to see the flower lanterns? Right, we'll leave after drinking this cup. After saying that, he seemed to have thought of something and looked at Emolien. Oh right. I heard a funny thing these 2 days. That Ding Ting Ding or something has set his sights on you, right? What does he want to steal from you? What do you think? Emolien gave him a cold look. What do you think this crown prince loves the most? Cultivation methods, spirit medicines. Maybe it's some precious spirit weapon or even a divine weapon. Duan Yu nonchalantly drank a mouthful of wine before sneakily sidling up to him. Hey, why don't you tell me? That thief sage, speaking of which, he never misses. He never misses. What exactly does he want from you? Could it be? Is it your life? The crown prince threw him a cold look and turned to look at Abba. Duan Yu almost spat out the mouthful of wine in his mouth. Seeing that he was about to spit, Abba hastily shrunk into the crown prince's arms and even pulled up his sleeve to block his face. In the end, Duan Yu didn't spit out the wine so rudely, but he choked and coughed repeatedly. When he finally managed to catch his breath, he exclaimed, What? Ding Ting Ding wants to steal Jojo away? Hey, 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 I say, you two still dare to come out like this? Duan Yu hastily moved the stool next to them and squeezed over to sit in a row. Let me tell you, that Ding Ting Ding has never failed before. Jojo. Seeing that Duan Yu's claw was about to land on Aber's small hand, Emolien abruptly reached out and directly tossed his claw to the side in disdain. Duan Yu ignored him and continued to drag his stool to Aber's side. He said solemnly, Jojo, how about we don't go see the lanterns? You should hurry back. That Ding Ting Ding is about to show up. Aber abruptly turned his head and glanced at Duan Yu warily. She suddenly reached out and pinched Duan Yu's left cheek, pinching it hard as she asked, You wouldn't be that Ding Ting Ding in disguise, right? This time, it was the Crown Prince's turn to almost spit it out. The two men looked at Xiao Mu in bewilderment. Why was this child so good at acting? She acted as if it was real, as if she was really suspecting Duan Yu. Duan Yu hastily pulled her hand away and kept yelling, Ouch, 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 ouch. Jojo, we've been together for so long. Don't tell me you can't even recognize me and that Ding Ting Ding. Aber pursed his lips and released his grip on Duan Yu's handsome face. Since we're already out, we're already out. We're going to see the lanterns, and I still have to go set off the river lanterns. Why are you in such a bad mood because of some random person? Chapter 922. The three of them left Morning Cloud Restaurant and followed the sounds of gongs and drums as they walked toward the crowd. At this time, a dozen people carrying stools and hose ran out of the building across the street. 4 to 5 people chased after them, shouting, T-fees, and the like. Mo Lien reflexively grasped Aber's small hand and pulled her to a side to avoid the surging crowd. Jojo. Mom. Aber hastily turned her small head in Mo Lien's arms. Wei Ziqin quickly rushed over and sighed in relief when she saw that she was safe and sound. She went up to hold her hand and said, I finally found you. Mom, you didn't go back with younger sister and the rest? We went back. It's just that a letter from thief sage Ding Ting Ding came to our house. What letter? Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and Aber asked in unison. Wei Ziqin took out a letter from her sleeve and sighed in relief. Jojo, it's good to see that you're fine. Alright, why did thief sage Ding Ting Ding write you a letter? Aber opened the letter to take a look. There was nothing written on it except for Ding Ting Ding's signature. What kind of trick was this neurotic person up to? Aber crumpled the letter and tossed it on the ground. She then pulled her mother's hand and said, Mom, don't bother with that senseless person. Alright, how did you find me here? Wei Ziqin's eyes flickered, and she quickly said, Mom felt that there must be something fishy about this Ding Ting Ding sending you a letter. I waited for you at home for 2 hours, but when I saw that you didn't return, I was truly panicking. I was afraid that something happened to you, so I came out to try my luck and see if I could find you. Alright Mom, I'm fine. There are too many people here, so let's find a more empty place to talk. Aber held her mother's hand. Wei Ziqin hurriedly nodded and heaved a sigh of relief. Jojo, your father is still waiting for news at home. He's very worried. Why don't we stop shopping and go home first? Aber nodded. Okay. Wei Ziqin and Aber walked in front of the two men. After a while, the people who came out of the tea house to ask for money rushed over. In an instant, the mother and daughter were pushed to the front. The two men reacted instantly. When they wanted to catch up, they were blocked by a large group of people. Get out of my way. Mo Lien panicked and sent out a palm strike. Many of the people around him were sent flying. D****. Duan Yu cursed softly. Auntie Wei was the person they trusted the most. Who would have thought that Ding Ting Ding would be so deranged and pretend to be Auntie? Mo Lien was very anxious. She took out her communication jade talisman and scribbled a line of words on it. Everyone, heed my orders. Quickly search Clearwater Fine Park. Don't miss a single corner. Jojo's mother probably hadn't left the palace yet. After Mo Lien put away her talisman, she looked at the sea of people before her. She couldn't care about anything else in her anxiety. She leaped into the air with a whoosh and stepped onto the eaves. She chased in the direction that Wei Ziqin left with Arba. This scoundrel of AB*TCH ding ting ding. When he caught him, he would definitely dismember him into 1,000 pieces. Duanyu also leaped into the air. With a tap of his foot, he paused on a bald uncle's head for a split second before disappearing in front of the crowd. The bald uncle's thoughts, Aya, F***CK. Chapter 923. Cough, cough, cough. Xiao Mu opened her weary eyes, and she could vaguely make out Molien's handsome face, which was magnified and anxious, continuously wavering before her eyes. "Jojo, you're awake." Emolien heaved a sigh of relief and pulled her into his arms. He patted her back gently, not knowing if he was comforting her or his own restless heart. "You scared me to death, Jojo. Don't ever leave me again." Emolien hugged her tightly and said in a low voice, "You don't know how dangerous it was just now. We were separated in an instant and you were taken away by that bastard Ding Ting Ding." "All right." Arba propped herself up and looked at him blankly. "Emolien, my mother just now?" "My mother, wasn't she?" Yes. "Don't worry. I've already sent someone to look for her. She'll be fine." She should have been left in Qingshui Fine Park by that Ding Ting Ding. He actually dared to touch my mother. Arba's eyes were burning with rage. Emolien was slightly startled. Then, he held her slender waist and lowered his head to say to her in a low voice, "Don't worry, mother will be fine. As for you, does your neck still hurt?" Ding Ting Ding, who was pretending to be your mother, hit the back of your head. "Does it still hurt?" Arba shook her head. When they were separated by the crowd, she turned to look at Emolien. She didn't expect Wei Ziqin to suddenly hit her. It could be said that she did not guard against her mother at all. So she was unusually angry now. No, she was resentful. This Ding Ting Ding, he had really blown the matter out of proportion. She hated it when people touched her mother. Ding Ting Ding was just playing a game, but now her mother was implicated. Originally, she didn't have much of an opinion about this playboy. A prodigal son was just a little playful. But now, she hated him. Emolien reached out and cupped Arba's little face. Her eyes were watery as she said, "Jojo, I'm not happy that you're thinking about someone else in front of me." "I want that person to die," Arba said coldly. Emolien's hand, which was cupping her little face, paused for a moment before she continued, "When I rescued you just now, I was anxious to check on your condition, but that guy escaped. Although Duanyu chased after him, I don't know if he can catch up to him." Arba pursed his lips. Emolien hugged her and helped her stand up. Only then did Arba realize that the two of them were by a tranquil river. The curved river flowed quietly, and the river lanterns carried the light. It floated from the upper stream all the way down. A faint light flickered in front of their eyes. At this moment, the surroundings were tranquil and quiet. The people on the streets seemed to have disappeared in an instant, leaving behind only the spreading darkness of the night. "Jojo, do you want to release the river lanterns?" Emolien held her little hand and walked to the riverside. Xiao Mu nodded her small head. He reached out and swiped at the air, and a beautiful lotus lantern appeared in his hand. "I heard that on the Lantern Festival, if you write your wish on it and release it with the current, you can brush away an entire year's bad luck and fulfill your wish." Arba finished writing it in a flash. The two of them stood by the riverside hand in hand, watching that river lantern float away with the current. Emolien tilted her head and looked down at Arba. "Jojo, what wish did you write? You really want to know?" Chapter 924. I want to know. He hugged her and lowered his head, his breath slowly drawing closer. He opened his mouth and a strange fragrance floated out. Chow Mu's lips curled into a chilly smile. My wish is. The man's eyes were filled with a faint light as he stared at her in a daze. Arbor suddenly swiped with her hand. The startled swan dagger suddenly jumped out of her consciousness. With a terrifying speed comparable to that of flowing light, it instantly stabbed into Emolien's heart. I want you to die. Emolien's eyes widened in shock. With an expression of disbelief, he stared at Arbor beside him. She had acted too quickly. He did not even have time to react. Or perhaps it should be said that tonight, the lights and starlight reflected off each other, causing him to involuntarily sink into her dazed gaze. The dagger in her hand sank into his heart, and even fiercely spun in a circle. I want you to die by my hands tonight. Arbor spat out these words with a cold expression. Without hesitation, she pulled the dagger out of his chest. On the startled swan dagger, a trace of blood slid down the shiny dagger, leaving not a single trace. You are not him, you don't look like him at all. My Lien is not as smelly as you. It's not comfortable to hug. It's uncomfortable. Arbor coldly stared at him, continuously scolding, ding ting ding, or it's more appropriate to call you the Snake Beauty. No matter who you are, I have no interest in knowing. The little girl's voice was so cold and heartless. In that instant, it caused his heart that had not wavered for decades to crack a little. Now you can die. Arbor coldly stared at him. Her fingers moved slightly, and a startled swan dagger quickly slid towards his neck. Black Lotus fell backwards and plunged into the river with a bang, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Arbor chased 2 steps forward, looking down at the murmuring river. A strange coldness floated in her eyes. He escaped quite quickly. However, he had been stabbed in the heart, so he didn't know if he would be able to return alive. Her mother was not someone anyone could touch. She had said it when she was at Xiao Ben's house. Whoever dared to touch her mother would have to be prepared to die without any hesitation. Arbor put away the startled swan dagger with cold anger in his eyes. He turned around and walked towards the crowded street. As soon as they reached the street, they saw Emolien and a group of people running towards them. Jojo. Emolien saw the baby in the crowd at a glance. She hurriedly rushed over and scooped the baby into her arms. His restless heart finally relaxed slightly at this moment. You're so stupid. The little emperor baby punched him unhappily. If you lose me again, I won't come back by myself. Emolien pressed her tightly into his embrace at once and stroked the back of her small head. No, I won't anymore. I definitely won't. Arbor curved her little mouth and looked up at him. Have you found my mother? I found her. Emolien nodded. She's in a palace maid's room in Qingshui Fine Park. She's not injured. When our people found her, she was just asleep. She's fine. Arbor's lips curled coldly. So what? He touched my mother. In my eyes, he's a dead man. She rejected this kind of evil joke. Chapter 925. The two of them hurried back to the Qiao residence and specially went to their mother's beautiful view court to take a look. Although Wei Ziqin's face was a bit pale, she was generally fine. Now that they asked her, she actually didn't know what had happened at all. Seeing her tired expression, Arbor didn't want to say anything more to her. After exhorting Xiayun a few words, she left the room with the crown prince. Qiao Zhongbong followed the two of them out and anxiously asked, "What the hell is going on? Why would Ding Ting Ding suddenly leave your mother in Qingshui Jiyuan's palace made room for no reason?" I heard that room had been empty for a long time. If little Mo hadn't sent people to search it up and down, I'm afraid that your mother wouldn't have been found unconscious there for 4, 5, 6, or 7 days. At the mention of this matter, Arbor's face was filled with anger. She clenched her fists tightly. Father, it's my fault this time. I didn't take that matter to heart. I implicated Mother. From beginning to end, Arbor didn't take the matter of Ding Ting Ding coming to steal her as a big deal. In the end, he harmed Mother for no reason. Simply preposterous. That senseless person. I wonder if he's dead now. Emolienne held Arba's hand and sent her to the entrance of Nanju Garden. She softly said, Xiaoyi led people to search the lower reaches of the river, but didn't find any trace of Ding Ting Ding. I think he might have escaped. Damn stinky man. A trace of ruthlessness flitted through Arba's eyes. Do you know who he is? That day, we met that woman in the underground village, the Snake Beauty. Do you still remember? She's Ding Ting Ding. Emolienne couldn't help but come to a realization. Did he grasp some special ability? Can he change his figure and face at will? This was much more brilliant than any disguise technique. No matter how many transformations there were, how could you turn a man into a woman, or an adult into a child? Even his voice could become no different from Wei Ziqin's. Men, his special ability is really very special. He can change the human body's bones, internal organs, and even meridians at will. So even though her knife seemed to have pierced his heart, it was possible that he had already moved his vital organs at the critical moment. Arba frowned, feeling a little regretful. If this person was not dealt with, he would become a huge problem in the future. If he were to hide himself, where would they find such an ever-changing person in the vast sea of people? Emolienne held Arba's hand tightly. Jojo, could it be that the underground organization has their eyes on you? Otherwise, why would Ding Ting Ding want to get close to his Jojo again and again? Arba sneered. If they dare to come, I'll kill them. I'll make it so that they won't be able to leave. Even he had no clue about the underground village for the time being. Previously, he had asked the various fortifications to pay close attention to the empty villages nearby to see if there were any changes, but in the end, they had not found anything. He didn't know if it was because he had cleared out the Snake Beauty's underground village last time, but these people might have become vigilant and started to lay low. All right, don't think so much. You should also go back to sleep early. Arba tugged at his hand and said softly. A good lantern festival was completely ruined by that senseless person. Arba felt a little suffocated in his heart. After sending Emolienne off, he washed up a little and lay down on the bed. After the third night watch, Arba opened his bright eyes. His body moved, and he flipped over and sat up. With a flick of his fingertips, an invisibility talisman automatically split open without any wind. Chapter 926. Arba's figure instantly disappeared into the night. He swept out of the Qiao residence and headed straight for the Imperial Palace. A good show was put on in Chonghua Palace that night. Because Zheng Ru was a newcomer and a favored consort in the past, she had always put on airs and acted high and mighty wherever she went. Now that she was in trouble, there were plenty of people rushing to step on her a few more times. Noble consort Lin, who had always been at odds with her and was also the third Prince Imoteng's mother, specially gave a few words of advice to the head steward of Chonghua Palace. The head steward immediately understood tacitly. On Zhang Ru's first day in Chonghua Palace, she hadn't even been in the Cold Palace for an hour when she was fiercely taught a lesson by a bunch of old consorts in the Cold Palace. Afterwards, she was thrown into the most remote woodshed on the west side. They glorified it by saying that they were giving a has-been noble consort the best treatment of a solitary woodshed. The others all lived in the same courtyard and didn't have the preferential treatment of a has-been noble consort. Although it was small, it was still a private territory, wasn't it? Zhang Ru was used to being pampered and spoiled, so how could she endure this vicious beating? That night, she developed a high fever from anger. Mammy Su was so anxious that a string of small blisters formed on her mouth. In addition, she had just been beaten by a vicious old mama until her lips were cracked and her entire face was swollen. She and Zhang Ru both needed a doctor and medicine. However, when she went to Chonghua Palace's steward in the middle of the night to ask for medicine, she was ruthlessly ridiculed by the steward. Her original words were, "Who do you think you are? Are you still that noble consort from Sephora Flower Palace? Are you worthy of me going to the Imperial Physician Building overnight to invite a doctor with your lowly status? Don't joke around. Hurry up and scram to wherever you live. Otherwise, you can't avoid a good beating." Mammy Su thought of the ruthless methods of that group of old concubines and immediately did not dare to make a fuss. She hurriedly fetched another bucket of water and returned to the woodshed, planning to apply a cold compress on Zhang Ru to lower the temperature. Who knew that as soon as she opened the door to the woodshed, she would see Zhang Ru lying on the ground in pain, clutching her stomach as she rolled back and forth. Mammy Su was so frightened that she spilled a bucket of water on the ground. She strode forward to help Zhang Ru up and repeatedly asked, Xiao Ru, how are you? Xiao Ru. Mammy, it's so painful. Mammy, it's so painful. Zhang Ru grabbed Mammy Su's hand. She was in so much pain that her eyes were filled with tears and her face was pale. Xiao Ru. Mammy Su stared at Zhang Ru's face in shock, only to see that the skin on the side of her chin looked as if it had been burned by fire. It was wrinkled and even had a circle of blisters around it. Zhang Ru did not notice the changes on her face at all. She only felt that her stomach was churning, as if it was going to burn her to death. It was so painful that she was sweating all over. When Abba sneaked over, she just so happened to see Zhang Ru's miserable appearance. Oh, what a coincidence! The beautifying pill's effects finally took effect. Just the added heat poison nether starseed was not as strong as the 6 yang poisonous flower's medicinal properties. If she had obtained the 6 yang poisonous flower earlier and added it to this beautifying pill, would she have needed to wait half a month for it to take effect? Abba did not have the slightest bit of sympathy in her heart. If not for this Zhang Ru coming up with such a treacherous scheme to frame her during the day, how could she have pushed the boat with the current and brought her to the cold palace? What was this called? This was called not harming others but harming oneself. She only had herself to blame. Abba stood outside the window with a cold gaze, silently looking at the master and servant pair shouting and wrangling inside. Chapter 927. A few days ago, she just so happened to learn a particularly interesting talisman. Abba swiped his hand and took out 3 ebony pieces from his inner world. His lips curled into an icy smile. Rather than having the crown prince do it, why not let her personally dispose of this person? In any case, in the king's heart, she probably already did not have a good impression of her. Adding this incident would only add a thick stroke of vicious and merciless to her reputation of being cruel and ruthless. Young-hee, Young-hee, are you prepared to meet your death? You really got off too easy. I originally wanted to let you have a taste of the pain of the heat poison wrapping around your body. The ebony pieces flashed and abruptly flew into the woodshed, silently hovering in midair. Zhang Ru shuddered all over. She seemed to have alertly sensed something, and she abruptly turned her head. Wet nurse! She shrieked. Mammy Su hastily turned her head and saw the glistening talisman energy flickering on the ebony pieces. It's a talisman! Mammy Su cried out in alarm. In that instant, a loud boom was heard, and the entire woodshed turned into shattered pieces of wood. Following an earth-shattering explosion, it shot into the night sky. This time, don't just mention Chonghua Palace. The entire inner court of the palace, or even the entire royal capital, was fiercely alarmed by this sudden explosion. Everyone jumped out of bed, hurriedly put on their clothes and ran out of the house. The senior manager had just sent away the troublesome Mammy Su not long ago, so she hadn't been sleeping soundly to begin with. This explosion completely blew her mind awake. The light in the small study of the Eastern Palace's side palace was still faintly lit. Mo Lien was still handling some urgent official business. His thoughts were abruptly interrupted by this explosion, and he threw down his brush and stood up. Hui Feng. Hui Feng jumped in through the window with a whoosh. Your Highness, the sound came from Chonghua Palace. Mo Lien narrowed her eyes slightly. Did Hidden Flower bring people to make a move? Hui Feng immediately shook his head. This subordinate is certain that it isn't. That's true. Hidden Flower had clearly told him to find an opportunity to make a move within 3 days. According to Hidden Flower's playful yet cautious personality, he would at least wait until tomorrow night to deal with that troublesome woman. Your Highness, do you want this subordinate to go investigate the situation? Hui Feng hastily asked. No need. Someone will definitely come to report the situation later. The Crown Prince had just finished speaking when the sound of hurried footsteps came from outside the walls of the Eastern Palace. Your Highness the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince couldn't help but be startled. He didn't expect the fastest person to be Lightning. Why aren't you with Jojo? Not good, Your Highness. Lightning leaped into the Crown Prince's small study, wiping his sweat as he hastily said, Crown Princess ran to Chonghua Palace overnight to settle accounts with Consort Zheng. Exasperated, Hui Feng hastily interjected, What did the Crown Princess do? The Crown Princess threw out 3 explosion talismans, and they were especially powerful. All of a sudden, Her Highness Consort Zheng and her room were blasted into the sky. The Crown Prince was startled, but then he laughed heartily and said, Good, good, good. As expected of his little emperor darling. Look at how this move immediately alarmed the entire city. Hui Feng snuck a glance at the Crown Prince. Seeing how the Crown Prince was laughing, could it be that this matter was worth spreading? Hui Feng's mouth twitched as he said, There's no such thing as Consort Zheng. It's merely royal maid Zheng Ru. Chapter 928. Lightning nodded repeatedly. That's right, she tossed Zheng Ru into the sky. At first, he didn't know what was going on. If it weren't for someone deliberately moving the leaves he was hiding in, he probably wouldn't have discovered that the Crown Princess had left in stealth mode in the dark. He and 2 hidden guards had followed the Crown Princess to Chonghua Palace, only to witness such an exciting scene with their own eyes. Thus, he hurriedly ran over to inform the Crown Prince and give him a heads-up, lest the Crown Prince didn't know anything and couldn't respond in time. Mo Lien nodded repeatedly as he listened, his gaze gentle as he gazed out the window. Jojo didn't want to make things difficult for him, so he chose to do it himself first. This child's gentleness simply made his heart ache. Your Highness, this matter should have already alerted the great king and queen. Mo Lien nodded and quickly walked outside. Let's go take a look. When the old great king of Mo Kingdom received the news and heard that the Crown Prince had already gone to Chonghua Palace to check on the situation, he didn't go. Gong Chong stood to the side, wiping the cold sweat from his forehead as he said in a trembling voice, Zheng Ru and her house were blown into the sky. The scene was pitch black, so we couldn't tell what caused the explosion. Mo Lei sighed. How is she? He didn't expect that something would happen the same night after he issued a decree to send her to the cold palace. The old great king didn't feel good either. After all, she was the person he had doted on for so many years. If she was gone all of a sudden, she's severely injured and only has 1 breath left. Gong Chong said in a low voice, but that Mammy Su by her side is miraculously unharmed. Oh. Mo Lei's gaze sharpened as he stared at Gong Chong. In the face of imminent disaster, that unruly old servant didn't protect her master immediately? That's not it. Gong Chong hurriedly shook his head. It said that the old servant wears an extremely powerful defensive mystic weapon. A mystic weapon recognizes its master. In the end, it protects its master more. Gong Chong said softly. Mo Lei's expression turned cold. What is the background of that Nanny Su? This humble one once saw an extremely powerful mystic energy erupt from her body. She seemed to be a level 12 mystic cultivator. She should be someone that Shuntian Prefecture placed in Ligay Courtyard. The Ligay Courtyard was considered a dance studio used by the Wang family. It was different from ordinary folk dance studios and nurtured high-end talents. Otherwise, the Zheng family would not have arranged for Consort Zheng to enter the Ligay Courtyard to be a little singer and actress. It was because she could get in touch with the great king at Ligay Courtyard that Consort Zheng was willing to go there. The old great king sighed. Send him to the Imperial Physician Building for a good look. She had been with him for so many years. No matter what, she couldn't bear to do it. Have you found out who's behind this matter? Is it? The old king suddenly paused halfway through his words. How could Gong Chong dare to answer? He had been with the great king for so many years, so how could he not know what the great king was thinking? The great king wanted to ask if His Highness the Crown Prince had hired someone to do it. After all, His Highness looked like he wanted to immediately execute Zheng Ru. Sigh, forget it. The old great king waved his hand and said, "Don't continue investigating. If the investigation really led to his son, could it be that he would behead his precious son for a consort? Therefore, there was no point in investigating." Chapter 929. By the time Empress Zhao received the news, Zhang Ru had already been sent to the Imperial Physician Building for overnight treatment. She couldn't help but sneer. The great king still can't let go of his consort Zhang after all. "Your Highness, you don't need to feel uncomfortable," old Huaxian Xian said softly. Old Nanny Huaxian said softly, "Zheng Ru is already a thing of the past. She can never rise again. Who knows? If she manages to pull through this time." "Pull through?" Old Huaxian Xian laughed. "Your Highness, you don't know. It said that Zhang Ru's face was completely destroyed by the force of the explosion." "Is that so?" Empress Zhao was slightly shocked, but she asked without batting an eyelid, "What did the great king say?" "The great king's intention is to drop this matter and not continue investigating. Zhang Ru has been released from the cold palace." "That's not the case. However, the great king will probably send an imperial physician to follow her back to Chonghua Palace to take care of her." "Heh." Empress Zhao sneered. "That's right. The great king still cares about his face after all. This person was only released into the cold palace on the day of the Lantern Festival. If he were to release her a day later, he'd probably feel embarrassed too." Old Huaxian Xian thought so too. She nodded and said, "That's good. It saves us the trouble of sending people to keep an eye on Zheng Ru. Let our people watch over her for a few more days. Once she's completely settled down, we'll transfer them back." "Okay." The Crown Prince. The Crown Prince went to Chonghua Palace and returned to the Eastern Palace after seeing that there was nothing to do with him, old Huaxian Xian said with a twitch of her mouth. Actually, not to mention the great king, even Her Highness probably thought that the Crown Prince had sent people to do this. This child. Empress Zhao shook her head, her eyes filled with affection. The next day, Qiao Mu listlessly crawled out of bed and bounced several times on the ground the moment she got out of bed. "Is this a morning temper?" A laugh came from outside the window. Arbor ran to the window and opened it. She saw the man in white sitting at the stone table under the flowers and trees. He waved his hand at her lazily. Boom! Arbor hurriedly closed the window and looked down at his disheveled appearance. His little face couldn't help but blush. What was this guy doing here so early in the morning? "Miss, His Highness has sent you a sumptuous breakfast." "Oh, just leave it there." Arbor found a shirt and put it on. While washing up, he asked Xiao Yao, "He came here so early in the morning just to bring me breakfast?" "That's right. His Highness has been waiting for you for a while now." Qiao Mu tossed the cotton cloth into the water basin and pattered over to open the door. "You must have snuck in." He probably didn't go through the front door and didn't alert her parents at all. "Yes." Emolien nodded seriously. "I climbed the wall." "Arbor." This guy said it so proudly. "What's going on?" "Jojo, come. Today's breakfast has your favorite flour honey and shrimp cake." He took out a food box covered with a thick cotton cloth. It was still warm when he took it out. "How is it?" Seeing her take a bite, Emolien couldn't help but chuckle. "Why did you suddenly think of making breakfast for me?" "Do I need a reason?" "I just wanted to make you something delicious." Prince Emo lifted her to his knees and whispered in her ear, "Baby, you're the best." Chapter 930. What's so good about me? Arbor said indignantly. "I was the one who blasted Zheng Ru into the sky, but in the end, those rumors are still targeting you." She had already heard about it from Lightning. The great king and Empress Zhao's first suspect was Prince Mo. That was why they didn't continue investigating, because they were afraid that they would find out about their precious son, which would put them in an awkward position. Emolien giggled and swayed Jojo as she hugged him. "It's okay. I'm happy to take the blame for Jojo." Aba rolled her eyes at him. Then what was the point of her running over to Zhengru in the middle of the night? Why didn't they think that I was the one who did it? Darling Chow disagreed and patted her chest. "I'm a great talisman master. The 3 explosion talismans I threw at Zhengru were high-level explosion talismans. Otherwise, she wouldn't have blasted Zhengru into the sky." Prince Mo laughed with amusement. "Maybe it's because you don't look like a high-level talisman master." Blame her for being too low-key, Aba thought. "Although your father isn't that great." Aba glanced at Emolien and pinched his face. "But he's really good to you. For your sake, let's forget about it." She couldn't be bothered to argue with that old fool. Forget it, forget it. She was a magnanimous person and wouldn't bicker with that old fool, the great king. Emolien's heart inexplicably softened. She quietly gazed into Aba's eyes for a long time before saying softly, "Jojo, you don't have to suffer because of me, okay? I'm your husband. Naturally, I have to shelter you from the wind and rain and sweep away all obstacles." Aba straightened her back and extended a small fist. "I'm your wife. I can also shelter you from the wind and rain." Emolien couldn't help but laugh out loud. He lowered his head and kissed her soft little face. "Wife. Why?" "Wifey, wifey, wifey." Emolien called out several times in a low and seductive voice. This made the little fellow's face turn red. Her heart was jumping up and down. Looking at him was very annoying. "Don't come any closer." Aba saw his curved thin lips close, hurriedly reached out a hand, forcefully covered his mouth. He patted his chest with his other hand, as if he was trying to stabilize his heart. Could he stop flirting with her? She felt that her heart was about to jump out of her chest. How was she going to resolve this? Emolien laughed in a deep voice. She bent her elegant and slender neck. A strand of black hair brushed past her eyebrows and lips, tickling them. "Hurry up and eat. If you don't eat, the food will get cold." The crown prince pulled down her little hand. Without another word, he picked up a plum blossom-shaped pastry and stuffed it into the little fellow's slightly open mouth. "Next time, I want to eat a Sika deer-shaped pastry." "Okay." "And a bear-shaped one." She purposely made things difficult for him. "No problem." Xiao Yao. His Highness' culinary skills would only improve under Mrs. Whipping, right? In front of the Marquis of Jiyuan's estate, a fat lady in her mid-20s walked up the steps of the Chow estate, her body swaying as she walked up the steps of the Chow estate. "Who are you?" The gatekeeper immediately focused his gaze on her and asked vigilantly, Miss Chow." The fat girl staggered to the entrance of the Chow estate and fell down without warning, smashing into the main door with a bang. Who exactly are you?" You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.